Let me start with an uncomfortable question, and then I promise we will spend the rest of this video making it a lot less uncomfortable. You have spent years quietly counting your unvested RSUs as part of your family's net worth. It shapes how you think about the future, how much you spend, when you might slow down. So here's the question. If you died tomorrow, how much of that number would actually reach your spouse? Most people have no idea. And for a dual income Bay Area tech household, that is a big blind spot because unvested equity is often the single largest line on the balance sheet, bigger than the house minus the mortgage. We plan around it. We fold it into the long-term math. What we almost never do is ask what it becomes on the one day nobody wants to picture. So today I'm going to walk through exactly that. What happens to unvested equity when an employee dies or becomes disabled? Why the plan document and not your offer letter decides it? How disability coverage fits into the picture? And what a surviving spouse is actually left holding? This is planning education, not legal advice, and part of the answer is knowing when to bring in an estate attorney. Let's get into it. Here's the thing to understand first. Unvested equity is a promise with a condition attached. The condition is that you keep working quarter after quarter until each tranche vests. That is easy to forget when the grant is large and the vesting feels automatic. But the conditional part is the whole story here, because death and disability are the two events that end your employment without a resignation and without a firing. And they are exactly the two cases almost nobody checks. In a lot of equity plans, unvested awards are simply forfeited when employment ends. And depending on the plan, death or the onset of a disability can count as employment ending. Now, that treatment varies from plan to plan, so the only reliable answer is the one written in your own document. Sit with what that means for a second. The RSUs and the options you have mentally spent may evaporate at the exact moment your family needs them most. Whether they survive you depends entirely on paperwork you probably have not opened since your first week on the job. This is the distinction that trips up really smart people, so let me be clear about it. The offer letter you negotiated as a summary is the friendly one-page version. The equity incentive plan and your individual grant agreement, those are the actual contract. And what happens to your invested awards on death or disability is generally governed by those plan and grant documents, not by the offer letter. The exact hierarchy can vary, so it is worth confirming in yours. Here's the problem. Most people sign that plan and grant agreement with a single click and never read the sections that matter now. Those sections are dense, they are written in legal language, and they interact with your estate documents in ways that are not obvious. So this is where an estate attorney earns the fee and where reading the actual plan is the job. Interpreting death, disability, and change of control language in an equity plan is legal work. It is not something to improvise from memory or from a video like this one. Pull the plan document and every grant agreement and have a qualified attorney read the relevant provisions against your will and your trust. The point of doing that now is to know the answer before anyone has to live with it. Now, you may have heard that equity accelerates if you die, and sometimes it does, but I want you to hear the word sometimes. Some plans accelerate your unvested awards fully on death or disability. Some accelerate just a portion. And some leave it entirely to the discretion of the board or committee. Which of those applies to you is a plan-specific fact. You cannot assume it. You have to check your own document. And the definitions matter just as much as the mechanics. The way a plan defines disability can be quite narrow, and it can be different from the way your insurance policy defines that exact same word, which means one could pay out while the other does not. These are details that live in the fine print, and they vary from plan to plan. If you hold options rather than restricted stock, the stakes get sharper because the type of option you have changes the deadlines and the tax exposure your family would face. So do not assume acceleration, and do not assume forfeiture. Get the actual language read. The whole value here is knowing which world you are in before it is ever tested. Let me spend a minute on disability because this is the one that gets skipped. Death gets the attention because life insurance is a familiar product. Disability gets ignored, even though becoming unable to work is statistically more common during your earning years than dying is. And it carries a double hit. Your income stops, and depending on your plan, your unvested equity may stop vesting at the very same time. Now, I'm a fee-only advisor. I do not sell insurance, so this is not about what to buy. It is about how the coverage works so you can ask better questions. One question is whether a policy uses an own occupation or an any occupation definition, because that governs whether benefits pay when you cannot do your specific job versus any job at all. Another is whether your coverage is group coverage through your employer, which usually ends when the job ends, or an individual policy that you own and can carry with you. Then there is the elimination period, which is just the waiting stretch between the disabling event and the point the benefits actually begin. And finally, how those benefits are taxed can depend on who paid the premium and with what kind of dollars. Those tax details change, so they deserve real verification, not a rule quoted from memory. So let's bring it all the way home. Picture the surviving spouse, months later, trying to piece this together. They inherit the vested shares. And for a tech household, those are usually concentrated in a single company at exactly the wrong time to be forced into decisions. What they do not automatically inherit is the unvested portion unless the plan accelerates it. And then come the deadlines. When options do vest or accelerate, plans commonly require them to be exercised within a short window after death. And exercising can demand real cash the estate may not have on hand. Whether that window is short or generous varies by plan, so it belongs on the list of things to confirm in your own grant agreement. There is also the question of who actually receives the shares. That is often controlled by the beneficiary designation on the equity account and by the plan terms, and those can diverge from what your will says. Reconciling them is an attorney's job. There is a tax dimension too. Inherited shares may receive a step up in cost basis, which can matter a lot for a concentrated position, but the rules there change over time and should be verified with a professional. Your spouse should not be learning any of this under it. So here's the bottom line. The unvested equity you count every single quarter is a conditional promise, and death or disability is the moment those conditions get tested. Read the actual plan document and grant agreements with an estate attorney. Understand how your disability coverage works before you need it. And make sure your spouse already knows what the household holds and what would have to happen fast. The planning is not about predicting the worst day. It is about making sure that day does not also become the day your family discovers the money was never fully theirs. If you want to talk through your specific situation, the link to schedule a call is in the description. And if you haven't subscribed to Vested yet, my weekly newsletter for Bay Area tech professionals, the link for that is down there too. I'll see you next week.